Hey, greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me today. Got back from traveling day before yesterday, just recouping and dealing with critters and whatnot. But also, what else was there? Gosh, brain farting. Still catching up on sleep. But anyway, what I wanted to share with you today comes from, let's name him Tim. Okay. Now, Tim's in a precarious spot. He is a law enforcement professional. And when he started his career, see, up here in Alaska, we got 3 different types of state troopers. You got your patrol troopers, which are the blue shirts. You got your gray shirts, which is JSO, which is Judicial Services. And then you have Fish and Game. We don't have game wardens. They're actually state troopers. They'll arrest your ass, take your shit. Anyway, you basically forfeit everything if you're out poaching up here in Alaska. The truck you use, the boat, everything. Anyway, so this particular Tim, when he first started his service many years ago, he started in the fish and game field. He asked me to omit exactly where this occurred and all that type of stuff. He hasn't been in the fish and game portion of the establishment in a very long time. It's just he's coming up on retirement, but he wanted to share this under a few guidelines. So we're going to omit where exactly it was and his exact name. I just appreciate him coming forward and being willing to share. So he was in his field training portion, just got out of his field training portion, and so the fish and game troopers get to play with the boats, the snow machines, the 4-wheelers, side-by-sides, and all that, whereas patrol guys are just in the squad cars responding to 911 calls and, that kind of stuff. So he was stoked. He grew up in Alaska, but, all the stories he heard when he was young about hairy man, little people, and all this, he dismissed it. It was just like, fanciful. It was part of our oral history culture, blah, blah, blah. Tim is at the Baskin. So he's literally the first time out on his own, feeling himself out. He's got a certain route he's patrolling. It's hunting season. And he's basically out there to check, make sure everyone's on the up and up. You got your hunting license, whatever. One of their issues he was saying they run into is radio contact. And so what they'd have to do is they had strategic locations where they can get up high enough to relay and, let's say, run someone for a warrant or, make sure something, running a gun VIN number to make sure, serial number, make sure it's not stolen, that kind of thing. They had a relay set up. So on this particular patrol he was doing, he's way back up in there, and to where he has to go many miles just to start a relay via radio, right? And he was by himself and just sitting there one morning, and the fog rose a little bit. It was hunting season for moose, caribou, and whatnot, and he hears a gunshot off in the distance on this particular trail he was on. So he stops with what he was doing and goes, okay, perfect. Hey, I'm going to go and check, make sure these guys are on the up and up. And that gunshot sounded about, man, a mile away or so. Let me go down trail, see if I could find these guys and do my job, basically, right? So Tim said as he was going, this particular trail he was on, it goes across a little bit of some muskeg, and then it cuts up, and it elevates, he said, about 300 feet up onto this trail that kind of cuts around this mountain, and it drops back down. And he assumed it was on that other side where it dropped back down, because he had been on this trail a couple times before. So he gets up there, and he's up on this plateau, kind of wrapping around this mountain, and just as he's about to come dropping down back into the little valley there, all of a sudden these two guys on four-wheelers come flying up it, right? So immediately he's off to the side of the trail. These guys see him and they look relieved, right? These two hunters, they immediately stop. Hey, they're down there. We just shot a moose, and they're panic stricken. So he's like, calm down. What happened? You know, are you injured? He thought they were rushing for medical help because of just he said their eyes were bulging out of their heads, freaking out. So he calms them down. He's talking to them, and he finally gets them to calm down enough to where he's understanding what they're saying, because they're both talking a million miles an hour, and you know, he's not hearing any of it. He's just hearing monster and there's something else. And he's like, whoa, he's thinking we shot a monster moose and something, you know. So he's calms them down and gets one of them to talk. The guy commences to telling him that, hey, we saw ourselves a legal moose. We shot it just a little while ago, just minutes ago. And it was right where the moose, it trotted a few yards and then flopped right up against the brush. It was actually pushing some brush over, some of the willows and stuff over where it fell. And he said, as we were going up on it to make sure it was dead, we heard a growl, so we thought it was a bear. And they had been sitting there quiet for so long, they figured, okay, we'll fire up the four-wheeler, rev up the four-wheeler, and drag the moose a little further away from the brush, and then gut it and do our thing. So he said he backed up his wheeler, and they tied it off to the hooves of the moose, all four hoofs, and were starting to pull it when all of a sudden the front end of his wheeler starts coming up, because he's just, you know, doing his thing about to tow this moose. His buddy wasn't even paying attention. His buddy was smoking a cigarette and basically just waiting for him to get done so they could get to work gutting and quartering this thing up. The guy explained to Tim that as his wheeler all of a sudden pulled up, he let off the throttle, and all of a sudden his wheeler was getting pulled backwards, and he was like, what the hell? And so he jumps off of the wheeler, and as he jumps off of it, he kind of tumbles and lands on his butt facing back towards the brush. And he said this thing had two hands on the moose, one around the neck and one kind of around the gut. And it was stopping him from pulling, and this thing was looking at him in his eyes. Now, the trooper was like, he was suspecting this guy was feeding him a line of shit because he shot something maybe it was illegal, it wasn't quite 50 inches, you know. He's hearing him, but he's not, you know, something's off about this guy's story. And so he hears him out. The guy says, as soon as I saw that, I jumped up, I pulled the pin on my little tow hitch on my wheeler, and my buddy jumped on his, and we came up at, you know, a quarter mile back behind us. We ran into you here. And he goes, okay. So he takes their information. And at this point, these guys are like, I'll leave my freaking wallet with you. I'm out of here. You know, you can return it, mail it to me. I don't give a flying rat's ass. I'm out of here. They were adamant about getting the hell out of there. So being skeptical, he thought they were trying to avoid potential prosecution or lose their stuff. You know, he thought they were up to no good because a monster and this and that, and you know, okay, you don't want to be near me right now. It's just, for him, it was a lot of red flags. He was a rookie, so you know, he was like, no, you guys are gonna stay right here, or I'm gonna arrest you both. And that's when they started saying, well then, you know, effing arrest us, you know, effing arrest us, but you're gonna arrest us over there where it's safe. It ain't safe here. And they kept saying this, right? And so he goes, okay, well, calm down, because you got to understand, he's by himself, and these two are armed people that are freaking out. So he decides to go a diplomatic route. He goes, allow me, I'm going to go down. I'm going to, you know, check it out real quick. It's not that far. You guys stay here. Keep an eye out for this monster. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to go and check this out, right? Tim said that the look of relief on these guys' face when he said he'd go alone, because at first he was wanting them to follow him back, and they weren't going nowhere. They were not reversing anywhere. They made it clear they wanted to go, but they agreed to stay there. So he goes, don't make me chase you guys down. I got your names, you know, and I'd hate for it to get prosecuted or something like that. Just you know, don't run off on me, guys, kind of thing. So Tim said he got on his wheeler. He went down the hill. He went right to where they said they were. And he comes up on the scene, and he could see where the brush was still pushed over from where the moose had fallen. And he saw the bottom of the moose legs from that upper hinge point on their legs, right, snapped off. And they're still attached to the ropes that he was towing it with. Same with the hitch. Everything was right there except the moose. All 4 hooves were there, still attached to the rope, but broken off. And so Tim said it was so surreal as he's sitting on the wheeler. He killed the motor, and he's standing there. He's standing up on the wheeler looking down at this scene. And he said as he's looking at it, trying to assess what the hell am I actually looking at, because he said it looked like someone had came and just took a big knife and cut everything off, you know, just above the hoof a little ways, and it was gone. You know, that's the best he could come up with, because there was no blood, no guts. It was just what he was looking at. So he gets off the wheeler, and as he's standing there, he's pulling out his pad, and he's starting to write down some notes, like, you know, time of day, location, this kind of stuff, right? Just for his records. And as he's doing so, he hears this low grumbling kind of noise, and he was like, oh, that almost sounded like a bear. So he takes a couple steps back by his wheeler and unlatches his little rifle holder where he had a shotgun. He grabs his shotgun, and he starts saying, hey, bear, bear, bear. And he's taking out a lethal round, and he's putting in one of those bear buster rounds that look like a little rubber bomb to shoot this bear in the butt and scare it off, right? Because at this point, he hasn't had a chance to actually look for the missing moose. Or, you know, it was just, what the hell's going on here, right? So as he's assessing, he redoes the load in the shotgun. And as he's doing so, he keeps hearing this noise, and it's moving from directly in front of him, out of view, inside the willows, off to his left a little ways. And he said all his training kicked in at that point, because it was one thing to hear what he thought was a bear growl. Then it was another thing to hear this movement, and the way it was moving. He had heard plenty of bears moving through the brush, and something told him it was not a bear. So he immediately gets behind he's got his 4-wheeler now between him and the noise. He wanted a barrier, you know, to at least if it was a bear rushing out, it would hit the wheeler first and give him some reaction time, right? So he's going through that, and he's so caught up in what the hell is going on in front of him, he didn't even hear the 2 guys on 4-wheeler come down behind him, because from what he said, they were standing up there and said they couldn't allow him to be down there by himself with what they saw, right? And to this point, they had never fully explained, and he didn't fully hear what they saw. They were just freaking out, right? So from what Tim said, they came down, and all of a sudden he realized they were there, and they were standing there with their guns, and they're all listening, right? They're all, and the guys are like, you know, pointing, you know, are you hearing this over here? Because they're all being quiet, and they're using little hand gestures. And Tim said it was seeing those guys there and them on point the way they were. His tension, his shoulders felt a little lighter, because initially, when he was getting behind the 4-wheeler, he said, in my heart of hearts, I felt like I was done. I was all alone, you know, and that's a powerful thing for a grown man to admit, you know what I mean? To say I was out of my league, you know, especially a professional in that field. You don't want to be in a position to look any less than the man, so to speak. You know, it's a guy thing, I guess. But anyway, so they're all looking in that direction, and he said they heard thrashing get louder and louder, but it wasn't moving far. It was almost like it was just right in one area, just out of view, and the thrashing was getting louder and louder, and then this he said it sounded like a woman being murdered, like the most high-pitched wailing scream he had ever heard in his life, and then just so fast a movement. He said he could not, it was moving faster than they could track it with their hearing. I mean, he said it was moving very, very fast. He immediately, once it had gotten a distance, he popped that worthless round out, the rubber bullet round out, and put in lethal, and was ready to go with it. He hadn't seen anything. This is just all happening, right? The two guys were like, we told you. And he goes, what? I haven't seen anything. And he goes, you don't want to see it. So they hear the movement going on, and it's a little distance away, so it's not like right up on top of them. And so Tim is asking the guys, he's like, well, hey, tell me what you saw. Tell me what you think this is, you know? And the guy commits to telling him, hey, it had a black face. It had a face like a caveman, had really wide jaw. He said it was monstrously big. It had to have been 5 foot across at the shoulders. He couldn't tell how tall it was because when he saw it, it was squatted down. He could see its knees squatted off to the sides, but this thing was just squatted down, holding the neck and the belly of the moose. And so Tim is absorbing it, and he's kind of like, okay, well, these guys are obviously something. There's something to what they're telling me. I don't know exactly what yet, but there's something to it. And so as the guy gets done telling him this, they hear movement coming back, right? And Tim said that everything in him, all his bravado, all his machismo, whatever you want to call it, vacated him. He said it vacated him very quickly. He said he felt like a 5-year-old little boy holding daddy's shotgun. He was holding the shotgun. This thing it sounded like it was coming directly at him, but at a methodical pace. He said it sounded very deliberate in its approach. It was like a koshunk, koshunk, one step after another in a cadence of like every second, there was another footstep, And he said it felt very deliberate, like I'm coming for you, that kind of feeling he said he had. So immediately he's telling the guys, be ready, don't accidentally shoot me, let's get shoulder to shoulder here. I don't know what the hell this thing is doing. And as they're discussing this, all of a sudden it went from ka-choom towards them to it's chaotic sound, he said. As they were sitting there trying to figure out what direction is coming, because they were hearing noises in multiple directions, right? He said it felt like they were surrounded by sound, with all the breaking and thrashing going on. And at this point, they could see the brush moving, and they're essentially walking backwards, not even realizing it, but they're all walking backwards away from this noise. And at a certain point, Tim said he stopped and got down on one knee because he wasn't sure, how he was going to deal with whatever this is once it clears the brush, right? Because he said it was almost like it would come closer to the edge of the brush and then back off, come a little closer and then back off. You know what I mean? That's the feeling he got from the sounds and the way the brush was moving. He got that impression, right? So as they're standing there doing that, he's down on a knee. These other two guys are standing, and they're like, we need to go. And he goes, quiet. I'm trying to hear. So at this point, Tim wants to see whatever in the hell this thing is, right? Because he works out here. So he wants to, what the hell is this, right? And so as he's down on his knee and these two guys are kind of quietly chatting and saying, we shouldn't be here. All of a sudden he sees something brown, like clear the top of the brush. It's still in the brush, but just above the brush, he saw this thing kind of fling and move, and they were all like backed off real quick because they didn't know what the hell it was. Well, it thrashed into the brush, and then the guy on the end, not the one immediately next to him, but the one further away, said, that was our moose, right? So this thing had flung the moose away from directly in front of them. You know what I mean? And so as they're trying to assess what the hell, all of a sudden they hear from where that moose landed, they heard thrashing and moving away from them. Very loud. At this point, you know, he had already, just out of habit, tried radioing a couple times. He wasn't getting nothing on the radio. Not a thing. And so it quiets down a little bit. They hear a little bit of a huffy puffy kind of noise. And so they decide, nah, let's get on the wheelers and get back up, at least up to that plateau, because I got distance to go before I can even start relaying information. He said once they decided they were going to jump on the wheelers and go, one of the guys' wheelers, something was wrong with the tie rod. So when they came to a stop, he basically lost one of the front tires and was kicked out, and it wasn't going anywhere in the moment. And so he's like, I'm going to get on with you, talking to his friend. So Tim has those guys keep an eye on it, watch his back while he fired up his wheeler, and then he was going to keep an eye while they got wheelered up and fired up and whatnot so they can get out of there. So as they're talking, and Tim backed up his four-wheeler, and they're still listening, because he said this noise, this breathing sound, this grunting was very loud. He said it was almost loud to the point where you could feel it in your chest, which really, really bothered him. He said everything, his hair was standing up on end. You know, there was small talk of, you know, it was a Bigfoot this, it was a Bigfoot that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, he hadn't seen anything. So he's just listening to them going, well, you know, we don't know. We don't know. So he backs up. They're talking. They get on their wheeler, and he says, go ahead and go. You get up the trail a little ways there by that clearing and keep an eye so I can finish backing up, turn around, and go. So they all agreed, yada, yada. Boom, they do their thing. Tim was the last one going up the hill. He passed those guys. They pulled off the side of the trail. He passed them. They got back up to basically where they almost ran into each other. They met him back up there. And then he stops, turns around, and comes back to the edge of the trail that drops down into the area they just left. And they could, it was at the bottom of the hill. He said it was just off to the right a little bit, and there was some brush that kind of obscured, but they could still see some of the rope and the bottom of the hoofs. And it was not, he said it was not easy to see those from that perspective where they were standing, but he could still make them out. Now, he said the hardest part about everything that was going on in that moment is he didn't say nothing to the two guys that were with them, the hunters that were there, because they were talking amongst themselves at this point about they couldn't believe what the hell was going on here, and just talking about all the years we've been here and nothing's ever happened. Well, Tim is looking down at the scene, right? He said he didn't say anything to the guys, but he said he watched this thing walk from his right to his left, in basically right at that brush line where they just were. And he said, because he was just standing there next to those willows and shit, he said the willows were at least 12 foot tall over him. And he said this thing, the way it was walking, was almost as tall. He said it had to have been every bit of 11 foot tall. And he didn't see a face. He saw very dark looking hair. He said it wasn't fur, it looked like hair. He could see the movements of the muscle groups from that distance. He said it was very, very muscular, very robust, it was monstrously big. And he said it walked right to left and then cut right into the brush. And a moment later, they heard a very loud scream and everything went dead quiet. And then they didn't hear anything. And he said he was continually trying to radio. He was holding up, the base, of his Motorola and trying to radio and not getting any signal. And so he basically followed those two out, radioed, someone responded. He got some backup the following day, because where his particular partner was on a totally different place, and it's Alaska. Sometimes you won't get trooper service for a day or two. Anyway, he said when he came back with backup, he had told them that initially that it was apparently a bear ran us off. It was aggressive in the brush. We didn't want to risk human life. We backed away. That's what he initially told his partner and whatnot. He said when they got back on the scene and he didn't even realize how freaked out he was the following day. But before they went and dropped down that hill, he had unslung his shotgun from the holder on the wheeler, and he basically had it in his lap and going down the hill. Well, when they got to the bottom of the hill, he said he was called out on why you got the shotgun out right now. You know that bear must have startled you, because his partner had been doing this shit for years and stuff, and so kind of busted his chops a little bit. And Tim was like, it was a very big bear. It was the biggest bear I ever seen, right? Well, this guy, his partner, when they were, because the moose hoofs were right there, the ropes, the hitch, everything was just as he had last seen it, right? It's all right there, and his partner goes, man, that is really odd. I've never seen a bear bite off. It would have drugged this stuff off. So let's take a look around. He didn't tell his partner what he saw. He didn't want mockery, so he was just treating it as a bear incident, right? Now his partner wants to go in the direction he said he last seen the bear. Well, not too far, within a quarter mile, it reaches a pretty wide creek with soft enough shores and whatnot, gravel and sand and whatnot, to where there should be some tracks of this bear if it did retreat that way, and let's see if we could find the moose. Immediately Tim was like, well, okay, let me tell you what I really saw, because you're asking me to do something that everything inside me is telling me don't go that way, don't do it. Tells him everything, repeats it all, but in the context of Sasquatch, right? Immediately the guy tells him, if you want a career, you want your career to last, this is a bear incident. And Tim immediately asked, why do I have to be quiet about what I actually saw? This guy told him, there's been times in the past where I have tried to report what you are reporting, and it went nowhere, and it went to a point of damn near disciplinary actions of some kind, right? He goes, if you want to pursue it, just be prepared for a psych eval and some other stuff. So he goes, okay. And his partner says, it's a bear incident, right? And he goes, yes, it's a bear incident. And they continued on. They walked back over there, and he said that when they got back to that creek, it was so quiet. And he said way off in the distance, he couldn't even begin to guess, there was the loudest whistle he had ever heard. And it was so... He said it was very hard to distinguish whether it was 500, 800 yards away, but it was a good distance away. And it literally was like it wasn't that far, but they could tell because of, anyway, it's one of those weird things when you hear these screams, whistles, whatever they may be, if they're at a distance, it's so powerful. It's hard to even put into context. But anyway, so they found nothing of the moose. They took the little toe strap and the hitch and what was left of the moose hoofs, chalked it up, did whatever they had to do or whatever as far as their paperwork and whatnot. And he said over the course of his career being out there, there was a few more instances of that type of stuff that he had to deal with. And hopefully, if things go well, after he's, secured his pension and some other stuff, he will be coming on and sharing in his own words. That would be awesome. I want to thank Tim for sharing that. I didn't want to get into it, but thanks for sharing, Tim. I appreciate it. I know you're in a compromised position when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I just want to thank you for sharing that portion of the things you've dealt with out here. And I'm hoping we can click soon and share some more of those experiences that you had shared with me. And again, thank you, Tim. And thank you guys for joining me, man. We'll catch you guys on the next one.